What happens when one of the most respected actors in Hollywood sits down for what's supposed to be a light-hearted chat, only to be met with relentless hostility and disrespect? In less than 30 seconds, a television host managed to turn a friendly conversation into a full-blown confrontation that ended with a legendary actor walking off the set in disgust. This is the shocking moment when Sir Anthony Hopkins had enough of Denise Welch on Loose Women. The morning began like any other. The studio buzzed with anticipation, cameras gliding smoothly into position, the hosts chatting casually as the audience murmured with excitement. Then Anthony Hopkins, immaculately dressed in a navy suit, walked onto the stage. The crowd erupted. It was rare to see such a towering figure of cinema grace a daytime talk show. His mere presence carried weight. At the panel sat Denise Welch, flanked by Nadia Sawalha, Jane Moore, and Kay Adams. Each greeted him warmly, their smiles polite but cautious. The introductions went smoothly, yet there was something about Denise's gaze, sharp, probing, that hinted this would be no ordinary interview. Hopkins adjusted his mic, offered a gracious nod, and began answering questions about his new film and storied career. His responses were thoughtful, tinged with humor and humility. The audience hung on every word. Then Denise leaned forward. Her tone shifted. "So, Anthony," she began, her voice laced with an edge, "you've played some very dark characters. Do you think that comes from a dark place inside you? Or are you just good at pretending?" The studio froze. The question landed like a slap. Hopkins gave a polite, measured smile. "Well," he said, "I think any actor draws from a range of experiences and emotions. It's called acting, after all." But Denise wasn't finished. She pressed on, her voice rising. "But you have to admit, there's something a little unsettling about you. People say they find you intimidating. Is that something you enjoy?" A ripple went through the audience. Nadia shot Denise a warning look. "I think what Denise means," she said carefully, "is that your performances are incredibly powerful. You command the screen." Denise cut her off. "No, that's not what I mean," she snapped. "I mean, do you like making people uncomfortable?" Hopkins's expression hardened. His trademark composure faltered just slightly, replaced by quiet steel. "I think you're confusing my characters with me," he said evenly. "I don't set out to make anyone uncomfortable. I do my job." The silence was deafening. Even the camera crew hesitated. Denise leaned back, arms folded, a smirk curling at the corner of her mouth. "Well, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "People find you creepy." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Hopkins' eyes narrowed. He sat perfectly still, dignified but clearly stung. She turned to her co-hosts for validation. "Come on, you all know what I mean." "He's got that vibe." Nadia shook her head. "I don't agree at all. Anthony's a legend, and he deserves more respect than this." Jane Moore leaned forward, her voice firm. "This line of questioning is completely inappropriate. He's our guest." Kay Adams nodded. "Let's move on." "This isn't fair." But Denise scoffed. "Oh, please. We're just having a conversation. If he can't handle a few honest questions, maybe he shouldn't be doing interviews." That was the breaking point. Hopkins exhaled slowly, his face calm but resolute. "I've spent my life being respectful to journalists, directors, actors, everyone. I've never walked out of an interview before," he said, standing to his feet. "But I won't sit here and be insulted on live television." The studio went silent. Denise's smirk faltered as the audience broke into uneasy applause. Hopkins gave a polite nod to the others, removed his microphone, and walked off set without another word. In that moment, Loose Women went from daytime chatter to national controversy, and Denise Welch learned what it meant to push a legend too far. Denise laughed. Actually laughed. It wasn't the laugh of someone amused. It was short, sharp, and dripping with condescension. "Oh, come on, Anthony," she said with a smirk. "Don't be so sensitive. We're just having a bit of fun here. That's what we do on this show." Hopkins shook his head slowly. His calm, steady tone cut through the air like a blade. "No," he said. "This isn't fun. This is disrespectful, and I don't have to tolerate it." He reached for his microphone, unclipping it carefully from his jacket. The faint rustle of the cord was the only sound in the room. The audience fell completely silent. Even Denise seemed to sense, too late, that she'd gone too far. She opened her mouth to backtrack, but Hopkins raised a hand, stopping her cold. "I came here today to talk about my work," he said evenly, his voice quiet but burning with conviction. "To share stories, maybe offer a bit of inspiration. Instead, I've been subjected to a string of personal attacks dressed up as questions. I have no interest in continuing this conversation." The panel sat frozen. Nadia looked stricken, her eyes glistening. Jane's face hardened, her fury barely contained. Kay covered her mouth in disbelief. Hopkins stood, his movements precise, every gesture deliberate. He smoothed his jacket, then turned directly to the camera. "To the people watching at home," he said, his tone soft but resolute. "I apologize that you had to witness this. It's a shame when something meant to celebrate art turns into something ugly. But I hope you understand why I can't stay." He looked to the other women on the panel, Nadia, Jane, Kay, and nodded with genuine warmth. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trying to steer this in a better direction. I appreciate your professionalism." Then he turned to Denise. For a moment, the entire studio seemed to hold its breath. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The look he gave her, icy, disappointed, and impossibly calm, said at everything. As Hopkins walked off the stage, the audience erupted. Some stood and applauded him. Others sat in stunned silence, still processing what they'd just seen. The camera lingered on Denise. Her smugness was gone. The color had drained from her face. She tried to salvage it with a nervous laugh. "Well, that was dramatic," she said lightly. But no one laughed. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Nadia was the first to speak, and she didn't hold back. "Denise, what were you thinking?" she snapped. That was completely out of line. "You ambushed him. That wasn't an interview. It was an attack." Jane nodded sharply. "Absolutely unacceptable. We should have stopped you sooner." Kay's voice trembled, low and furious. "You crossed a serious line today. And now we're all going to pay for it," Denise's bravado faltered. She looked from one co-host to the next, defensive and pale. "I was just asking questions," she said weakly. "He didn't have to take it so personally." Jane leaned forward, her voice cold. "Don't even try to spin this, Denise. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted a reaction, and you got it. But at what cost?" Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Producers were shouting into headsets, scrambling to cut to commercial and contain the fallout. But the damage was done. Backstage, Hopkins was already in his dressing room, quietly gathering his things. A production assistant knocked timidly. "Sir, is there anything we can do?" Hopkins gave a faint, weary smile. "No, thank you," he said. "Just please tell the crew they did nothing wrong. They've been wonderful." Even in frustration, he radiated class. As he left the building, crew members stopped to shake his hand and apologize. Hopkins thanked each of them, calm and gracious to the end, then walked out into the daylight with his head held high. Meanwhile, back on set, the remainder of Loose Women limped on. Denise tried to pivot to another topic, but it was hopeless. The life had gone out of the room. Nadia, Jane, and Kay spoke little, their faces stiff and somber. The audience barely reacted. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, the dam broke. Nadia turned on Denise, her voice trembling with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? You embarrassed this show, you embarrassed us, and you disrespected one of the greatest actors alive." "How could you?" Jane chimed in. "This is going to be everywhere, Denise. News outlets, social media, the works. You've made us the laughingstock of television." Even Kay, usually the calmest one, snapped. "You need to take responsibility. You humiliated him and you humiliated us. Stop pretending this was just doing your job." It wasn't. Denise raised her voice, desperate now. "Why are you all attacking me? I was doing my job. If he can't handle a little pushback, that's on him, not me." But no one believed her. The damage was already irreversible, and as the studio emptied out, the applause that had once greeted Anthony Hopkins' entrance was replaced by a chilling, echoing silence. The room went still. Not a breath, not a whisper. The 3 other panelists stared at Denise in disbelief, each of them realizing, perhaps for the first time, that she truly didn't grasp the gravity of what she had done. Or worse, that she understood perfectly well and simply didn't care. Nadia broke the silence first. She shook her head slowly, her voice trembling with anger and disappointment. "You know what, Denise? I can't even talk to you right now. You're completely delusional if you think you were in the right." Without waiting for a response, she stood and walked away. Jane and Kay followed, their faces hard with quiet fury, leaving Denise standing alone in the echo of her own defiance. The fallout was instant and devastating. Within hours, clips of the interview flooded social media. Outrage spread like wildfire. Hashtags supporting Anthony Hopkins trended across multiple platforms. Respect Hopkins. Loose women disgrace. Denise Welch cancelled. People were furious, and they weren't holding back. "How dare she treat a legend like that?" one viewer wrote. "Anthony Hopkins is pure class. Denise Welch is an embarrassment," said another. "I've never watched Loose Women before," another comment read. "But after this, never again." The video was replayed millions of times, dissected frame by frame. Every raised eyebrow, every smirk from Denise became fuel for the outrage. Television critics were merciless. One headline read, "Loose Women hits a new low with its disrespect toward Anthony Hopkins." Another declared, "Denise Welch crosses the line in disastrous on-air meltdown. This wasn't journalism," one critic wrote. "It was a personal attack disguised as an interview." Hopkins showed remarkable restraint in the face of outright hostility. Another noted the moment when the other panelists tried to intervene. Even they knew she'd gone too far, but by the time they stepped in, the damage was irreversible. The network behind Loose Women faced intense backlash from viewers and sponsors alike. Thousands of complaints poured in. Petitions circulated online demanding Denise's removal from the show. Sponsors issued carefully worded statements expressing their concern. Through it all, Anthony Hopkins remained silent. He didn't post. He didn't give interviews. He didn't comment. And that silence spoke louder than any response could have. He had already said everything that needed to be said, on that stage, with quiet dignity and restraint. His composure in the face of humiliation became the story. But the other panelists weren't silent. Nadia Sawalha posted a heartfelt apology online. "I want to sincerely apologize to Sir Anthony Hopkins and to everyone who watched that interview. What happened was unacceptable, and I deeply regret not doing more to stop it. Anthony is a brilliant actor and a kind man, and he deserved so much better." Jane Moore echoed her. "I am horrified by what took place on our show. Hopkins is a gentleman and a consummate professional. I am ashamed that he was treated with such disrespect." Kay Adams added her own message. "This was not our finest moment. I hope Anthony knows that not everyone on that panel shares the same views. He has our deepest respect and admiration." Denise, however, remained defiant. In a short, curt statement, she said, "I stand by my questions. I believe in challenging my guests. and I will not apologize for doing my job." The backlash was immediate and brutal. Viewers accused her of arrogance, ego, and a complete lack of self-awareness. Even her most loyal supporters struggled to defend her. It was clear Denise had miscalculated badly. She had believed that her confrontational style would be seen as bold, fearless, good television. Instead, it was seen as mean-spirited, unprofessional, and cruel. Media analysts began using the clip in journalism training sessions, an example of what not to do. The Hopkins interview became a case study in the importance of respect, empathy, and tone. The contrast between the two could not have been more striking. On one side, a man who had spent decades earning the respect of his peers and audiences worldwide, maintaining grace and composure even when provoked. On the other, a host who mistook aggression for courage, provocation for professionalism. And in the end, there was no question who had come out on top. Hopkins walked away with his dignity and his reputation, not only intact, but elevated. People praised his composure, his quiet authority, his refusal to stoop to the level of insult. Denise, on the other hand, faced the steep price of hubris. Her reputation was tarnished, her credibility questioned, and her future on television uncertain. But the incident also sparked something bigger. A broader conversation began about the culture of talk shows, about the fine line between journalism and humiliation, about how easily entertainment had drifted into cruelty. Viewers demanded better. They wanted interviews built on curiosity, not confrontation. They wanted hosts who listened instead of attacked. And above all, they wanted respect. Because as Anthony Hopkins had just proven to the world, dignity doesn't raise its voice. It simply walks away. The room fell silent, the tension hanging thick as fog. The other three panelists stared at Denise in disbelief. A mix of shock, anger, and disappointment etched across their faces. It was painfully clear she either didn't understand the magnitude of what she'd done, or she understood perfectly and simply didn't care. Nadia finally broke the silence, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "You know what, Denise? I can't even talk to you right now. You're completely delusional if you think you were in the right." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away. Jane and Kay followed, shaking their heads as they left Denise standing alone under the harsh studio lights. The fallout was instant and brutal. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. By evening, the footage had gone viral, racking up millions of views. Hashtags supporting Anthony Hopkins dominated global trends. Viewers were outraged, calling the interview disgraceful, cruel, and an embarrassment to British television. Anthony Hopkins is a class act, and Denise Welch is an embarrassment, one tweet read. Another wrote, "Loose women should be ashamed. Hopkins deserved better." Even people who had never seen the show weighed in, horrified by what they saw. News outlets picked up the story, turning the incident into a full-blown scandal. Critics piled on. "Loose Women hits new low with shocking disrespect toward Anthony Hopkins," one headline declared. Another fumed, "Denise Welch crosses the line in disastrous interview." Editorials condemned the segment as a personal attack masquerading as journalism. One critic wrote, "Hopkins displayed more restraint and dignity in 5 minutes than most hosts manage in a career." Sponsors began expressing concern. Advertisers paused campaigns. Viewers flooded the network's inbox with demands for Denise's removal. Petitions circulated online, gathering thousands of signatures within days. Meanwhile, Anthony Hopkins stayed silent. No interviews, no statements, no responses. His quiet dignity spoke louder than any rebuttal could. He didn't need to defend himself. The public had already done it for him. His fellow panelists, however, were not silent. Nadia Sawalha posted an emotional apology. "I want to apologize to Anthony Hopkins and to everyone who watched. What happened was unacceptable. We should have done more to stop it." Jane Moore echoed that sentiment. "I'm horrified by what took place. Sir Anthony is a gentleman and a consummate professional. He deserved so much better." Kay Adams added her own statement, calling it "not our finest moment," and assuring fans that not everyone shared Denise's attitude. But Denise doubled down. "I stand by my questions," she said. "My job is to challenge guests, and I won't apologize for doing that." The backlash was swift and merciless. Even her longtime supporters began distancing themselves. She was accused of arrogance, ignorance, and cruelty. The public consensus was clear. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Media schools began using the clip as a case study in failure. It was dissected as a cautionary tale about how ego and provocation can destroy professionalism. The contrast between Hopkins' poise and Denise's hostility became symbolic of the very worst and best of modern television. And they wanted accountability when things went wrong. The network, facing mounting pressure, finally broke its silence. They issued a public apology to Anthony Hopkins, acknowledging the unacceptable conduct and promising to review internal policies to ensure this never happens again. But to many, the apology felt hollow. The damage was already done. For Hopkins, it was just another chapter in a long and storied career, a momentary storm that could not touch his legacy. But for Denise Welch, the consequences were dire. She had alienated her colleagues, infuriated the public, and severely tarnished her reputation. Whether she would recover remained uncertain. But one thing was clear. The day Anthony Hopkins walked off the Loose Women set would be remembered for years to come. It would be remembered as the day professionalism clashed with arrogance and dignity triumphed over disrespect. A day when one man, faced with hostility, chose grace instead of anger, and walked away with his integrity untarnished. In the weeks that followed, the story dominated headlines. Think pieces explored what had gone wrong. Some praised Hopkins' composure. Others condemned the show's toxic format. Even industry insiders admitted the incident had exposed a deeper rot within talk show culture. The obsession with viral conflict over genuine conversation. Hopkins' quiet strength inspired a reckoning. Other celebrities came forward with stories of being ambushed or demeaned by hosts chasing clicks. Networks began re-examining their ethics. Producers introduced new guidelines. A few even pledged to rebuild trust with audiences through respect, not controversy. As for Hopkins, he kept working, unbothered, delivering yet more powerful performances. Nadia, Jane, and Kay rebuilt their credibility through honesty and remorse. And Denise Welch, once a familiar face in daytime TV, found herself increasingly isolated, not by cancellation, but by her own refusal to take responsibility. The Loose Women incident became a defining moment, a permanent mark on the show's history, and a lasting reminder that dignity outlives scandal. Anthony Hopkins could have lashed out. He could have met disrespect with rage, but instead, he simply stood up and walked away, calm, composed, untouchable. In those 27 seconds, he showed the world what true class looks like. The story of that day isn't just about a celebrity storming off a set. It's about self-respect. It's about boundaries. It's about the power of walking away when you are being mistreated, and the lasting impact of choosing grace over confrontation. Because when you treat people with disrespect, you shouldn't be surprised when they walk away. And when someone walks away with the dignity that Anthony Hopkins displayed that day, they don't just leave the room. They leave behind a lesson that will echo for years to come.